This is Kristin Hedgcock.
And I'm Ash Matson. You're listening to Apta Sophia,
which means useful wisdom in the pursuit of biblical womanhood.
Hey guys, it's Ash. A few weeks ago, Kristin sat down with her husband Scott for an impromptu, off-the-cuff interview that touches on a variety of topics. But for the bulk of the interview, they hone in on homeschooling and home education, and Kristin gave some great perspective and shared a lot of practical wisdom that we think might be useful to you guys. I know it was useful to me. So we thought we would release it for our listeners as an uncut bonus episode. Keep an eye out for Scott's new podcast, The Hedgcocks, which will be launching soon. And until then, we hope you enjoy.
All right, so first question. What do you think's easier, to be the interviewer or the interviewee?
Probably the interviewer.
You think so?
Uh-huh.
Doesn't the interviewer have to drive the conversation, though?
Yes.
And you think that's easier?
I think it is easier because you know kind of what you want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You want to know where you want the conversation to go, more or less.
Okay.
And it's less pressure to have to, think of a good answer.
Yeah. Or at least an answer.
An answer, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I could be like, that's a good question. I haven't given much thought about that or whatever.
Yeah. I guess where I'm going with this is just to have real conversations with real people. And so I want to get good at that. Right? I want to be good at drawing out of people who they are, what makes them interesting. Because I honestly think, a lot of,
Do you think everybody's interesting though?
Well, I think there's a bell curve, kind of like in statistics. I think most people are. I think people are interesting if they're thoughtful, if they have a reflective view of life. I think that's interesting to hear them. Mm-hmm. If they think about what they're doing and they have reasons, right? I do think we could probably find some people that if you went and you try to ask them questions, you get a lot of yes, no, hadn't really thought about it. You could find some people, and that would be difficult. But I even think with those people, if you really, it's like what I'm trying to do is have just real conversations with real people. I would imagine even those people in certain circumstances with the right friends, maybe with the right beverages.
In the right context.
Yeah, I think everyone can be interesting. I'll put it that way. Because I think, and here's the thing, I think that we love to watch, well, I don't know about you. In general, people love to watch celebrities, athletes, politicians, people like that be interviewed. And they find them interesting most of the time. But I think that, there's an attraction there because of their position, because they're well known. But I think if you took most normal people and really did the same thing and got them to be reflective and think, I think you could get really interesting stuff out of just most anyone.
Would you ever want to interview the most interesting man in the world?
The Hedgcocks guy?
Uh-huh.
You mean the actor or the guy that he is supposed to be?
Both. You could interview them as him as the actor and the persona he portrays, and then you can interview him as a person, as himself. Is he really the most interesting man on both?
Well, by what standard,
both
right?
Fronts.
Yeah, I mean, what makes him the most interesting?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'd rather interview the actor, and I would because what I want to know from him is, all right, man. So what's it like when you go out into public and people are like, "Hey, Hedgcocks, most interesting man in the world.
Tell me something interesting."
Yeah. And what if he's got nothing?
Yeah.
What if he's just what if his name is Stuart and, other than that, he has a bread delivery business and he just takes bread to everybody all day and really has nothing interesting at all.
Yep.
I don't know. So I would go for that. I'd go for the most interesting man in the world. But So, but on that, I mean, I think you're interesting. Obviously, I married you, so we got that going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'd just start off by, I know what were we talking about earlier. Okay, we'll just go there. Earlier we were talking about, okay, so I'll use the issue, but I think what I want to talk about is the language behind it, because I think language is interesting. So this idea that words have meanings, right? Obviously you teach children, so you're a homeschool educator. And we were talking earlier about, what was it? Pro-life evangelicals for Biden.
Right.
That's an interesting position some people have staked out there.
Yeah.
So what are they saying about themselves? They're saying they're pro-life,
Yeah.
which historically means what? They're against abortion,
Yes.
which in the American context means that they're against legal abortion.
Correct.
They're for overturning Roe versus Wade, which means that they're for Supreme Court justices that might rule that way, which means that they traditionally would be for presidents who would appoint those sort of justices. Or am I reading too much into that to say that that's what the term historically meant?
No, I agree with you on all fronts. I think to be a pro-life evangelical for Biden is an oxymoron.
Yeah, it's an interesting position to
It's
stake
an
out.
interesting position. Yeah. Like, I don't understand how you can reconcile the two and not give, no matter what front you're on, whether you're for Biden and everything he represents, they're just antithetical to each other.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how you reconcile these two very, very, like, vast different positions, pro-life, and then, like, Biden and everything he stands for.
Right. Well, and
He doesn't historically stand for that.
nor does he currently.
Right.
I mean, I think if you think about it, I think that the thing that causes us a bit of consternation is the pro-life term. Because, look, I could understand evangelicals for Biden.
Yeah.
Right? I could understand that position, right?
Yeah.
People who just don't like Trump. And, I mean, I get that.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
I'm not,
I don't even get the evangelicals for Biden, to be honest.
Well, I mean, look, that's not my position, right?
Right.
I'm trying to wear their shoes, right?
Uh-huh.
And I could see them saying, like, okay, look, I don't want to be a single issue voter.
Right.
And I think on the whole, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say it this way. When they say, on the whole, there's, I'm balancing the scales. They, in their values, see more good than bad in Biden. And let's just say this about evangelicals. I think a core of what it means to be an evangelical today is that you want to be nice.
Right.
You want to be liked.
And loving.
And loving. And if you look at a lot of, what Biden and the Democrats push as policy, from a certain point of view, you could say that those things are nice and kind and loving, right? I mean, they're nice and kind and loving with other people's money. But, let's forget about theft for a minute. And, I'm just saying, if you try to be as charitable as possible,
Right.
I'm just saying I could see that, but it seems like the modifier of pro-life.
Yeah.
That to me seems like what's going on there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I would not personally be an evangelical for Biden at all. But I'm saying that I could see where they're coming from. But to go that extra step and to say we're pro-life evangelical for Biden, you're like, whoa.
Yeah, because you're having to put something on the back burner. And that's, I think, your pro-life position. Because that's not something that Biden is for or wants or is going to approve or pick people to legislate for.
Yeah.
So, I can see where people might, I've heard it said that they're not just a one issue voter or one issue voter, that they look at everything, and definitely social programs are very big because they are on face value. If you just take them at face value, mimic a lot of Christian values. Caring for your neighbor and the sojourner and all of that. On the front, they mimic that. Now, I think if you delve deep into what that means, I use the word mimic very strategically there. I don't think that's what that is. If you actually look at what biblically what the definition of taking care of your neighbor and loving your neighbor and taking care of the sojourner and all that kind of stuff, I think that, if you dig a little deeper, I think we have very different perspectives on how we do that.
And what would you say is the difference there? Because that's interesting. Then we'll come back to language, but I think you're going somewhere with this. I'm interested in hearing how you see that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that I think that, yes, it is important that we take care of refugees. Sure, I don't see any problem with that.
Does anyone disagree with that?
And I don't think anybody does disagree with that.
Right.
I think the disagreement is, do we take other people's money? Do we just open our borders? Do we, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And I would say we have very, very different biblical perspectives on that, where when Jesus says not Jesus, he didn't say it, but in the Old Testament, when it talks about, taking care of the sojourner, does it really mean collecting taxes from everybody or from the very wealthy or whatever, and just not having any kind of due process for these people to come into your country or whatever, that they just get free access to that? We should naturalize everybody who comes in and not do due process. Well, I don't think that that's the biblical precedent that is set in Scripture, but that is what I think gets pushed currently is, we just, might possibly have open borders, and people who are here, let's not deport them, let's just naturalize them, and, not charge them criminally for coming here illegally, and, all the things. So
people always point out, you're all here illegally, right? Meaning, you can't see us because we're on podcast, but we're white. So people say that and say, so do you think maybe...
So do you think the Native Americans should have reviewed their immigration?
Exactly.
We're here for a reason.
It kind of proves a point, right? I mean, it's
it's a sad point.
It's incredibly sad.
Yeah.
The way it's gone down, and we don't mean to make light of that at all, but it's funny how people use that as the gotcha line, and it's like, no, I think you misunderstood. I think what you're saying is that, look, a culture is not defined by a land. It's impacted by a land, but a culture is only defined by a people, which is defined by language, which is defined by ideas, which is defined by values. And if you just do a swap on that, you'd suddenly have a whole bunch of people who aren't on the same page. That's going to have an impact. And some people might argue it's a good impact or a bad impact, but nonetheless, it's an impact. So that's a bit of a tangent, though. So getting back to, I think, your main point, which resonates with me, is that, the scriptures definitely talk about love of neighbor and care for others. But at no point does it ever, not in the Old Testament, nor does it do it in the New Testament, ever say that, therefore, kings or those in authority have the right to extract wealth from some to give to others, with the threat of violence, right? Which is our current system,
or imprisonment,
or as we were listening to the podcast the other night, maybe they don't do it through taxation, because let's be honest, most of what's going on now in terms of programs that are supposed to help people, they're not even being paid with taxes. They're being paid with money that's just printed out of thin air. And so you could argue that, well, taxes are theft. Sorry, taxes for the purpose of transfer payments. That's theft. That's just simply stealing from one person and giving to another using the threat of force. Printing money is just theft against everyone, right? Because what happens is, we work for a living. So, the assets we have, the money we have are things that we earned based on our labor. And that's basically our time, which is our life. We're giving our lives away in service to others, and we're being paid for it. And so when that wealth is transferred to others via taxation, that's theft. But when it happens via the printing press, you're just diluting the money supply, and now you're giving money to people who didn't earn it. And so now you're letting them compete with people who did. And it's actually economically, it's not even in the end fair to those that you're supporting in that manner, because now what have you done? You've essentially paid them to be unproductive. And at the end of the day, and see, this comes back to why do you believe people are poor? Poor people are poor. I mean, obviously there's exceptions. Some people they can't work and therefore they're poor, whatever. But if you talk about the main line of poverty, it's because people aren't as productive as they could or should be. And so the goal should be to make them more productive. Yeah. Right? In which case they could get out of poverty. But the government, they're actually incenting them to do the opposite. And at the cost of inflating the money supply, which is really just a tax on everyone. So now they're stealing from everyone to give to some. And they call that compassion. But see, all these points are unargued for, right? So getting back to language, like there's an argument to be made, right? There is an argument to be made. But I think most evangelicals today, and especially those who are to my left, I think they're unthoughtful. I think they're lazy, and I think they've embraced the cultural trend of preferring rhetoric over reason and thought, which is why they come to the conclusions they come to. So I guarantee you, well, first of all, the people that came up with that were theologians, and most theologians don't know anything about economics. They don't understand it. So yeah, they know their Bible, and they know maybe some history, but they don't know economics. So they're just ignorant when they come up with that statement. And they're allowed to be in that ignorance because people will cheer them on and support them in that. Because at the end of the day, it's good rhetoric.
It sounds nice.
Yeah, I mean that's what it sounds like. It sounds nice, and for those who sign it, and I can't impugn all of their motives. I don't know, but at least for some people, it's hey, I'm not the stupid backwoods hick, wacko Christian. I'm the cool, culturally with progressive Christian. So you can like me and respect me. I'm safe.
Right.
But on the language side, so this is something you're teaching. You teach our kids. So we digressed on a particular point around politics, and that is what it is. But I think there's a broader point. What people can talk about deeply informs what they can believe, and what they believe deeply informs who they are, and deeply informs what they will do. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts as someone who's educating, 4 children. You're about to pick up a student, so you're really going to be educating 5 children, one of whom is not yours. And so how does that work as kids learn? I mean, you're in that every day, seeing them learn. How important is it just that words have meanings?
Yeah, well, I think it helps them define their world.
Your world gets bigger when you can define more things,
Your world gets
right?
bigger when you can define more things, and you realize who you are in the context that you're in. I know I'm being like super, super general and really broad in this, but and we can get into specifics, but yeah, I mean, yeah, the more language that you can give your child, especially, just the more context that you're creating for that child. And I know it's super broad, super general, but so I try to read them, hard things. And hard things maybe not so much in actual like vocabulary or like way above their grade level, but hard things in like difficult topics. Because they are, I don't want them living in a bubble. I want them to be exposed to hard truths, and I want to shape their opinion about those hard truths in with a certain perspective. So we talked a lot about the Middle Ages last year. Each year in history and in science, we focus on different eras, but in history was the Middle Ages. And so we were talking about the French Revolution, and honestly saw a lot of, and so we talk about current events as well. And so really my then 7-8-year-old second grader really picked up on a lot of parallel things between current times and the current political culture and civil unrest and all that kind of stuff, and paralleled that with the French Revolution and how the French aristocrats were seen, and how maybe perhaps a certain political party is seen, and how the people's response to that was, and how our responses to certain things. And it was just really interesting that because I talked to him, or all of my kids, but he's super inquisitive, he was able to parallel and actually say, we shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z because this may cause civil unrest, just like the French Revolution. And it was super, super insightful. This little 7-year-old was able just to pick up on that. What a fantastic perspective to teach your 7-year-old through history, through just through learning the French Revolution. So, and the facts around that. So anyway, back to language. I mean, there is just a small example of, language creates context, and there's an example of that. You are able to get more facts and context because you have more perspective. Yeah.
And just so the listeners who are maybe just picking this up understand, so in your role, you homeschool now 5 students. Yeah. 4 of whom are your own children, 1 of whom is
a bonus child
from a friend. So just unpack that a little bit. What do you do in terms of what's the approach you take, what's the curriculum, what's the background, how long you've been doing it? Just kind of give us the pitch on the Hedgcock homeschool. Tell us
homeschool prep school.
Yeah, tell us the history real quick, just so people can get some context. So I think this part especially might be really useful for certain people who are, hey, everyone's a homeschooler now.
Everybody, it is super. I was homeschooling before it was cool and popular. Maybe it still is not cool. But so I've been homeschooling. This is my 7th year in homeschooling. I had to stop and count. So I have kids, from the ages 4 through 11. So pre-K through 6th grade. And, so we got started homeschooling, my oldest for various reasons. One is I wanted to be the one to inform their worldview and inform how they see current events, how they see their neighbor, how they see their brother, how they view me, how they view their dad, how they view just everything. I wanted to be the one to teach that to them. So it's kind of been a journey.
So you just, I want to stop you for a second. You just said something big there. You said worldview.
Yeah.
So for people who aren't in, our community,
Sure.
or don't have the same background, like, what does that mean? And how might you contrast that with, say, another approach to worldview, and how, how do you see it, and maybe what's a more historically typical American, say someone who uses public school, how they might see it, and where's kind of the contrast?
Right. I think, I can just give an example of a worldview that's just kind of low-hanging fruit, right? So worldview is your approach and perspective on everything you look at. So, for example, how did we all get here? One worldview would be that we were created beings by a God or a higher power, or, whatever, and you see the world as a created thing through God or through this higher power. Another worldview or perspective would be that, everything evolved, everything, just happened to come together perfectly, and over long periods of time, the world came to be as we know it. So that is one perspective, and you interpret everything in light of that perspective. You interpret in the environment and climate change and what's happening under that perspective. You interpret genetics and history under that perspective. So
you think there's some foundational things that people believe that informs the rest of how they see reality?
Exactly, yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who don't see that.
Yeah.
Right? They're just going to assume, well, what are you talking about?
It's just facts.
It's just facts. Yeah, we're just
the world just came.
Yeah,
But that's a worldview, right? Like, they don't know it, right?
Right.
They don't know that that's
Right.
a worldview.
Yeah, that's just that. They're a fish that's been swimming in the ocean, and salt water. What's that? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, so that's helpful. So I think.
Sure.
So what you're saying is you're laying out that worldview matters. I mean, is it fair to say maybe that's the most important thing? Like, that maybe that's the most important. If you're going to draw, like, if you're going to, take a piece of paper and you're going to draw, okay, I'm going to draw a line of distinction between what you're doing in terms of homeschooling, and say how others might approach it. That right there. I mean, now we can start to fill out both sides of the paper, and there's positives and negatives about everything, right? But if you're going for distinction, I'm not even saying right or wrong at this point. I'm just saying difference, distinction. That might be the biggest thing. That it sounds like what you're saying in a sense is you're reflectively thinking about and recognize that worldview is a thing.
Yeah.
And now that's going to inform the way that you approach
math or English or science or.
So how does that work though? Because math is math, numbers are numbers. So whether you take what you might call naturalistic, materialistic worldview, in which in the beginning there was nothing popped into something, it exploded into everything, and then the rocks became planets, and the planets became people, you still have numbers, as opposed to God made everything. How's math any different?
How is math different? That's a good question. You're a lot more philosophical than I am. That's Mr. Hedgcock handles the philosophy department of homeschool prep. So why does math matter
or is math any different? Maybe the answer is no different, whether you're doing pagan math or Hindu math.
Sure. 2 + 2 = 4, no matter what perspective that you have. But why does it? Why? And again, I would refer to Mr. Hedgcock as in my philosophy department, because he can better articulate those questions. With our kids. But
I would just say that the question proves the point. In a materialistic world where we're just matter, truths like 2 + 2 = 4 don't exist. So the very mere fact that we have 2 + 2 = 4, that only exists because we live in a created world with meaning. Because, well, it's the world we live in, and that's why it happens.
Right.
Right. And now I know people on the other side, they're just going to say the same thing. Well,
Right.
no, we're discounting things. But my point isn't, like, obviously, the point is, yes, we do count things, and we've assigned symbolic meanings to them, and we've called those things numbers.
Right.
But the fact that we have any agreement, the fact that we have anything that we call truth, that presupposes that there is a knower and purveyor of truth. Because the one thing that naturalistic, materialistic processes do not get you is they don't get you to truth. I mean, even Darwin admitted this. He talked about his horrible doubt, and he said, with me always arises a horrible doubt that if man is simply evolved from lower animals, do the strains of his mind have any meaning at all? For if we could examine the mind of a monkey, what sort of meaning might it have? And so what evolution gives you is survivability, right? But it doesn't give you rationality.
Right.
Because there's a number of irrational things that might produce survivability, right? I could say that some hominid ancestor, saw a lion and thought, well, lions are cute and I should pet them. And the way you pet them is to run the other way and climb up a tree. That's a completely irrational set of propositions, yet it would provide the same sort of survivability that there's a lion, it might eat me, I should run up and hide up a tree from it. One happens to be true.
Right.
And yet, and the problem just gets worse when you really think about it, because I just gave you one untrue scenario. The fact is there's an infinite number of untrue scenarios that would all, if they led to the right actions, would still provide survivability, and yet rationality is the exception, not the rule. And so why is it that we're in a universe where apparently we're always getting the exception to the rule of survivability?
Right.
It seems like a pretty big arrow pointing to an intelligent
created order
creator.
of things. Yeah, see, that's why Scott answers these questions, because he can articulate it way better. I'm just like, I don't know. Something can't come from nothing, which is what I feel like is kind of given to me or to us through maybe more evolutionary approaches to the beginning of the universe. But kind of went on a little rabbit trail on that. So
because we're talking about homeschooling.
We were talking about worldview, and
but I think it's really important because it's sort of like in my job in finance, in financial planning and wealth management. It's like if I could just get people to recognize some really basic truths and live them out, that's actually way more important than all of the detail work that they think I should do for them. And it's like I always start with people and I say, look, if you're trying to achieve financial independence, which is just freedom, right? Which I think at the end of the day, what people want. They want freedom from the cares of this world in terms of financial cares, to live their life, to be their authentic selves, to spend time with their family, to do the things that they care about. They want that, and money is a vehicle to do that. Assets, wealth is a vehicle to do that. I shouldn't say money, because money can be, inflation can strip away your money in an instant, but not an instant, but in a short period of time. So wealth can do that. But if people would just recognize that, there's two inputs, right? What you have and what you spend. And if you're spending too much, you need to have more. And if you don't have enough, you need to get more. But those are really basic truths. And what I'm saying for you is, I think it's kind of like people, a lot of times I think they want to come to you or they want to listen to something and say, how do I be a better educator of my children? And you can give them tips and tools.
Sure.
Right. But there's these really important foundational things that need to happen, such as worldview. Otherwise, what are you doing? Well, you're just going to get your kids really good at doing math for the sake of doing math. Like, we could do that, right? Right. But what if they became really good at math and figured out how to exterminate half the population of Europe? Like, and their math made them really good at that. Yeah.
No, for sure. Yeah.
So there's these
character
other
matters.
things,
Yes.
right? There's these
Yeah.
worldview things, because it's not just about filling their head full of facts. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to pause there for a second and say it's a tangent,
Yeah.
but it's really not. And I think we need to emphasize that with people, because people always want to get the hot take. They want to get the tip. They want to get the how-to.
Right.
And I think most people would be better served if they took a step back,
Yeah.
just like I try to with people, and say, what's the foundational big picture here? Let's get
Yeah.
that right. Let's understand that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's be thoughtful about that and have an approach. And their approach may not be the exact same as ours. That's fine.
Yeah.
But let's be thoughtful and start to work out from there. So that being said,
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. Over the course of the summer with COVID and everything, I think I have had nine parents come up to me and ask how to homeschool their kids. And I always start out with the one question: what is the end goal? What is the end goal? Because I would much rather have a child who is caring, loving, honoring, and hardworking, truthful, than be or take all the AP classes in every single subject, but be deceitful, conniving, just not trust, not, I care a lot more about character.
and I think that's
And not saying that I don't care about grades, or I'm like, well, if you don't ever pass your third grade math, I'm okay with that. I'm not saying that. But what is your end goal?
well, because you could have the one
You can have the one
without the other.
without the other.
But probably if you get the first one right, the character,
Right.
the caring, the honoring, all of that, then you'll probably get the passing of third grade math.
For sure.
But if you focus on the passing of third grade math, you might not ever get the other stuff.
Right.
And I think this is the way that the business world is going. I mean, people do business they hire, generally speaking, with people that they know, people they like, people they trust. And I know, that there are a lot of people out there that want to hire people. They want to, whether that be hire people for their business or hire people to do work for them. And they want those good, wise, virtuous people you're talking about.
Sure.
They may not use those terms, but
Right.
I think it's what comes across as they know people better.
Right.
And here's the thing: knowledge has been commoditized. You can get knowledge anywhere.
Yeah.
You can get an MIT, get all the knowledge of an MIT degree for free from MIT. You can audit all of their classes online. If you don't pay them, you're not going to get the degree, so you don't get the street cred of it.
Right.
But if you just want
have
the knowledge,
yeah.
you can get it. And if you think about it, it used to be not everyone went to college. So a college degree meant something because not everyone had it, right? Sort of like at one point, a high school degree meant something because not everyone had it. But now once everyone has it, it means very little. It's just check the box.
Right.
So, and I'm not against college per se. I'm not at this point saying, well, forget college. But
Right.
what I am saying is I think what you're getting at is that you could come out of college, you could have all the data you need, you could have all the knowledge you need. If you don't have the things you're talking about, I don't think the economy of the future.
Yeah,
and
they're
of
not
the
going to be
employers-
successful. Like a
Yeah.
person who works in finance is not going to be successful if they are a cheat, if they are a liar, if they are dishonest, and if they're two-faced.
Well, they could work for Goldman Sachs. But other than that, yeah, exactly. There's only so many of those jobs available.
Yeah, you're not going to be very successful.
And probably not in the long run.
Right, not in the long
It
run.
probably
Maybe in the
isn't.
beginning you're going to get caught. And so...
Or you have to go into government.
Yeah, or a politician. Those are your options, Goldman Sachs or a politician. So, I ask that of parents because I want them to, what is my goal? Is my goal just to get my kid through high school, just to get them through college? Or, is my goal for character stuff as well? Because there are some things that you can incorporate in school, and even how you approach math. It's not so much, it's not so much getting through the math lesson. It's how do you get through the math lesson? Sure, you can be screaming and yelling at your kid, and your kid is screaming and yelling at you, but, well, you checked off the box. Like, how do you define success? And so it's also just to get the parents to realize that, you know what, you may not finish that math lesson, but you and your child had a really serious conversation about how to relate to each other, that I'm not going to scream at you because I value you as a person, and you're not going to scream at me because you value me as a person and I'm your mom. And that's what we value. We value mutual respect. And we may not finish that math lesson, but we have learned and you have instilled a different lesson in your child that is way more valuable, in my opinion, than any third grade math lesson that you may accomplish for the day. And so, if you find yourself doing those things or those kinds of behaviors going on, ask yourself, what do you really want to instill in your child? If you're screaming and yelling and you guys are both screaming and yelling at each other and there's tears being shed and stuff like that, you have to really ask, well, how important is this third grade math lesson to check off the box? And am I really being successful? Mm-hmm. And kind of redefining success in homeschool or in education. So
it's not just getting through the material.
It's not just that is an important component of it. Obviously, we don't want to be stuck in third grade math for the rest of their lives. But I think that you can go about accomplishing those things in a lot more dignified way, that where you are teaching your child how to persevere and how to do hard work and how to do it respectfully, versus getting really pissed at your boss and blowing up at your boss because he's asked you to do something that you don't want to do. I think we've all seen at some point in our lives those coworkers or that boss perhaps interacting with other people like that, and they needed their mom to tell them, hey, you don't get to talk to me like that. They may have been the person that finished the math lesson but didn't learn the life lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you use a particular curriculum or a particular model,
right.
or
so,
what goes along with that? And how is that, if at all, related back to the earlier point you were making about, we were talking about worldview?
Yeah. So, no, that's a good question. And it's kind of formed morphed maybe over the course of the 7 years that I've been teaching the kids.
So you adjust over time?
I do adjust over time, not rigid. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's a school board and the state has curriculum mandates, and that's how you get it, right? Is you have some committee of bureaucrats who tell you what to do. Is that how it works? Right.
There are some days that I wish that I didn't have to plan the things that I have to plan. But no, I'm it. And I like that. So it's me. So I started off and still do a classical model of education. And this is a very foreign concept to most of us because it is not the public school, their current model of education. And so basically, in a nutshell, and this could be an hour's long lecture of what classical education is, but in a nutshell, it is educating your child in the let's see. Like I said, you can go an hour. So I'm trying to think of how succinctly to put this without confusing anybody. So every child, for the most part, goes through kind of three stages of development, and it's educating your child given those stages of development. So they're they're educated in what's called the trivium. And so the elementary school years would be kind of like grammar school was, how we referred to schools maybe 100 years ago. You had your grammar school, and then you moved on to some kind of like perhaps what we would call like a finishing school or a prep school or something like that. I'm trying to use terms that people may be somewhat familiar with. So the grammar stage, the grammar school, you basically maybe pre-K through sixth grade-ish, depending on the child. You're just doing what it is, you're filling their heads with grammar. You're filling their heads with language. You're filling their heads with definitions. You're just adding vocabulary in all subjects, history, science, English, geography. We do Latin, and you're just filling their dictionaries of all those subjects full of meanings. And then in the middle school, they really get to chew on that a little bit. And they get to kind of repeat back to you a little bit more through writing what all of that means, who Henry Clay was. Again, my 8-year-old today was asking me about the Missouri Compromise and why Missouri wanted to be a slave state, and why the Union basically had to, why this big thing, why did there have to be this big compromise between the Union and Missouri, and why was it a big deal? So that he is really close to approaching, even though he's on the younger side, he is really approaching the kind of the second stage of learning, which is the dialectic, where they get to kind of talk about it and develop positions a little bit and learn a little bit more logic. And then the final stage, which would be high school, is really debate and learning and really honing in their logic and being able to articulate their position and response and rebuttals. And so that's what really attracted me to this school, or this method of learning rather, is because I liked that the kids that I knew could articulate very well their response, and they were very respectful and tried to learn the opposing view and just didn't make assumptions, and they knew what they knew, and they could defend that. And that's something that I didn't get growing up, and I definitely could benefit from that even now. And so I wanted that for my kids.
Do you think maybe that's something all of broader society could benefit from today?
Oh, absolutely. You look
moving beyond rhetoric.
Yeah.
Mere rhetoric.
Yeah.
And actually thinking about logic and...
Right. And approaching things, really understanding the other side and maybe doing research instead of just making a whole bunch of assumptions of what the other side believes. I think everybody would benefit from a debate class, which is basically what all of the high school level is in the classical model.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as you have been working through this, educating children at home, what do you think it's done to you? How has it shaped you as a person, as a mother? Yeah,
it's redeemed a lot of my education. I don't know where I was the first, 8 years of being in school, because I'm I don't remember most of the stuff that I'm sure I learned, or at least I remember hearing about. And I think the other really big thing that I really, really enjoy doing that I didn't mention before, you asked me about what curriculum do I use. I use solid math and reading curriculums as major staples. I go out and buy, math curriculum and stuff like that. and reading the same. I have, reading curriculum that I'm very diligent in following the lesson plans and stuff laid out. Where we talked about the importance of how I want to really form my children's worldview. It comes in through the other subjects, history, science, and actually use just regular books. They are interested in, well, I told my son that I would look up more on the Missouri Compromise and Henry Clay because I didn't really know too much about it, other than what I just said. But yeah, that I can sit down, I can do a little bit of research for them, find some books on the topics that they're interested in, and I really let them direct what they want to learn. So my 8-year-old wants to learn more about the Civil War, wants to learn more about, the slave issues and slavery and what the Missouri Compromise was, and then we can sit and talk about it. Like, that's the interesting thing. Is the thing that I love to do is everybody has an opinion on something, even if it's just a basic opinion about it. Like, we can all agree that slavery is wrong, right? Even my 4-year-old can say, yes, slavery is wrong, but we all can glean from each other. And so I just ask them, what do you know about slavery? What do you know about the Southern states? What do you know about the Civil War? They tell me what they know, and then I get to use a book that I've picked out to inform, to kind of fill in the information gaps. And then we can sit and talk about it. And like, do you see slavery today, perhaps? What could be a form of slavery? And if they don't know, I can offer some suggestions. Like, well, credit card debt, that's a form of slavery.
Yeah, heroin addiction.
Heroin addictions. There's a lot of things that, can be viewed as some form of slavery. Maybe not to the extent of owning another person, although I do think that does exist today, not in a racial sense, but
some countries,
some countries, but I'm just talking in the U.S. But so it's really great to like have these discussions because I want them to be able to respect other people's opinions and that everybody has some kind of information, something that they can learn from, and they need to take turns and listen to what other people have to say. And, that is a valuable skill that I think my 8-year-old has down better than most grown adults that I know. Mm-hmm. And so that you don't know everything. No one person knows everything. Everybody can learn from somebody. And I think it's just a really valuable skill. So, I approach science the same way. What do you know about the sun? What do you know about, and they will rattle off. And again, my 8-year-old, who tends to be the more inquisitive one and asks 20 questions about the same thing every which way, asked about, so if stars can have supernovas and will eventually explode, can the sun explode? Well, that is a very good question. I didn't have the answer to because I had never thought of it before. But had I not have given the platform for them to think freely for themselves, I wouldn't have looked into this question. And so anyway, I researched the question for the benefit of all of them, but, to answer his question, and turned out that our sun is made up of different composition of different gases, which makes it more stable and a lot less likely to explode, and then, compared to other stars. And I, of course, forget what all those gases are right now off the top of my head, but, it just, I don't have a particular history curriculum that I use on a regular basis. I don't have a particular science curriculum that I use. I just kind of pick a theme for the year. Last year was astronomy, which is where I got my star question from. And I let them kind of lead into their interests. Like, how cool would have that, How cool would that have been if somebody was like, wow, your questions are really interesting. Let's go find more about that. Instead of, well, I have an agenda and I have these chapters that we have to get through. And so
The state of Washington says.
we need to, this is what is important, not what you think, but what I have to think. And so you see that attitude honestly reflected in a lot of people today. What I have to say is important. What you are thinking isn't, because it might be weird or a different perspective or whatever. And so I'm just going to plow through this information. You're just going to sit and listen. And there's no discussion.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting, you know, just thinking through what you just said about it. I mean, it sounds like you really know your stuff. So, you know, for our listeners that don't know, your background, you were educated as a teacher? Like you spent a lot of time studying this? Or tell us about your background.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, super educated as a teacher. Nat. So my background, so I graduated high school. No,
Good job.
I did that at least. No. So I'm actually a labor and delivery nurse. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in science and nursing. So I do have a little bit of a science background, but, you know, mostly health science. So yeah, honestly, I'm learning right along with them, but I have learned how to learn. So when my kids ask me questions, I like, let's look this up at the libraries are closed now, but in the past it would be, let's go to the library and let's go check out some books. And I'm teaching them how to learn because I want them to always be learning, even past the age of 22. I want them to love learning. And that was something that wasn't instilled in me. It's grown as I've been teaching my children. And I want them to be excited for learning. Yeah, so that's my background. I don't have any training other than whatever books I can read about homeschooling. And again, I'm learning a lot of the stuff for the second time, but really for the first time. So, and I think also like that's too important for them to see that not everybody is good at everything, and that there are times when I'm like, yeah, I'm really struggling in this subject too, so let's figure out how to do this together. And that they can see I'm vulnerable, but I'm also a model for learning how to learn.
So, you know, some people would say, you know, well, you have this skill set, like you're a nurse, and now you still work as a nurse, but it's not your full-time occupation. Right. I mean, if you're kind of pulling double duty right now because you're working and
thanks COVID.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess what I'm thinking of, what I want to get at is how do you answer what are even the issues that come up? Because I don't even know exactly what the questions are, but you know, I'll just say this: in our culture, the idea of being a woman who has a large degree of focus on the home, on educating children, on raising children, that would seem to be you're not living your best life. You're not living up to what you could be. Like, oh, you could be a career woman. You're more focused on that. You could do this. Yeah. Like, you could have an impact, and you know. For sure. I mean, it's sort of like, I guess what I'm getting at is,
why am I not doing what I've been gifted and trained to do?
Yeah, and as a woman, you know, as a modern, intelligent, you know, 21st century woman, you know, post-feminism, feminism, whatever. Yeah. Isn't this kind of, you know, beneath you, or shouldn't you just outsource this? I mean, I guess I'm trying to get at a question, but I'm just, what comes at you? How do you think about that? Just, you can kind of speak to that issue, and then maybe what's the perspective you take for women, you know, who, now they're faced with this and they're like, you know, this is beneath me, or this is not, you know, what I'd be so much better off if I was just, you know, in my career. Or the woman who's just like, I'm not a teacher, I can't do that. I'm not, you know, it's so hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. Let's see. Well, I don't think it's beneath me to teach my children things.
Kind of everybody does that. I mean,
Right.
Everybody starts out homeschooled, right?
Right. That's what I tell everybody who's like, oh, I could never homeschool. And I was like, well, you realize you taught your child a foreign language. And they like look at me very puzzled. And I'm like, they did not know English. And you taught them English without having a degree in English.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're right. I
Ding,
did.
ding, ding, ding.
So you do teach your kids a lot of hard things. English is a hard language, first of all.
Yeah, our kids are pretty good at English.
Our kids are, they're pretty good at English.
At least speaking it.
So you're always teaching your kids something. And as far as impact, like, sure, when I take care of a mom in labor, and help her deliver her baby and overcome hard things, of course that makes an impact. I would say that I have more of an impact. Parents have more of an impact on their children than they do strangers. You see it in people who, look at the people in prison. Look at the people who struggle in life. The biggest denominator of all those people groups are that they do not have parental involvement. I mean, school teachers will tell you, if parents are not involved in their children's education, that their kids struggle in school. So what does that say about your influence and impact on your child? And if every parent, not necessarily saying that you have to homeschool, because I'm not a homeschooler best perspective, but just what if you had a much more, were way more involved in your child's education? Imagine what kind of impact collectively that we could have as a culture on the future of our society, on the future of our kids, if we took an interest in their education. Because it goes back to what I was saying. It isn't so much just making sure that the child passes the third grade math lesson, but you are teaching your kids so much more. Because a teacher can do that. A teacher can make a child check off the list and check the third grade math lesson, right? But a parent is what forms the character of that child. And when you don't have parental involvement, that negatively, dramatically impacts a child. If a child does not have a dad, dramatically impacts the child. If a child is raised without a mother, dramatically impacts a child. Unfortunately, children in broken homes dramatically impacts a child. All these things dramatically impact children. We see how necessary parental involvement is to children, and what greater opportunity can you have than being involved. One way is being involved in their education. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty big impact, more so than any woman that I help push her baby out. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, do I have an impact there too? Sure. But I'm not changing a society. I'm not changing a culture by helping a woman go unmedicated, and conquering that.
Well, and it's interesting too. You think about it. So this week I will be involved in going to Presbytery, right? And making decisions about the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
So So we're part of the Presbyterian Church, and we're part of a church that belongs to the Presbyterian Church in America. So it's a Reformed Presbyterian denomination, and one of the things we do is we get together as elders, and it's going to be guys. It's going to be a bunch of men, because we have male only elders, and we're all there getting together and doing the business of the church. And sometimes people look at that and say, well, where are women involved in ministry, right?
Yeah.
Where are the women of the church? How can we promote them, right? And there are many things for women to do in the church,
For sure.
even outside of raising children.
Yeah.
But in terms of what the future of our church looks like, what we do is important this week in terms of qualified men to come and take a call to be a pastor in our presbytery, to go in and to have shepherding care over people's souls. That's important, and that's one side of the coin. But the other side of the coin that's just as important is all of those little souls that are being raised up for the future,
right?
That are the future ministers, or the future mothers, the future people,
right? That
will be. It's just it's so important. I think what you've hit on is it is really important, and it's almost like, in some ways, it's almost shameful to say that. I mean, our society recoils at that. Wait a minute, Scott, you just said you men are going to go to Presbytery and have discussions and run the church. Well, okay, but children are part of the church too.
Right.
And the women and all of our wives, our pastor's going to go, and his wife won't be there. She'll be with the kids, raising them.
She'll be with the smaller church members.
Yeah.
Ministering to them. Yeah.
Yeah, these are people, children are people who need to be ministered to. And you have this amazing ministry, and we think about it, like you and I both went to a Christian school where, they sent out missionaries, and I believe in foreign missions. I mean, I support it. You should go, 100%. And you should love and serve your neighbor who's far off, right?
For sure.
In every way, with whatever their physical needs are that you can do, whatever their spiritual needs are, you should do all of that, and you should do that with your children.
Yeah.
And
you're not going to have very many ministers if the mothers are neglectful and the fathers too are neglectful, and not going back to the character instilling. Like, they may be really good at math. Do you ask the ministers to do a math problem?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, they are, character, right? And
right.
They have to go to seminary and all that. So you're asking different kinds of problems for sure. But you can have the most, reformed, whatever, knowledgeable man come before you. And you can then ask, well, how was your marriage? Well, I cheat on my wife, and I have a girlfriend on the side. Like, character matters, right? I don't tithe. I'm not generous. I don't remember the last time I did anything for my neighbor. Like, that would be
I wrote up some silly statement and signed it on pro-life evangelicals providing, right? I mean,
that's
just have these
horrible.
Yeah,
horrible
you have
thing.
these people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so women do have a ministry, and they do have a role, a calling. It's called mom.
Yeah.
And it's not a degradation to women. It's an honor. Like, you are called to just be, you have the most informative years. Mothers have the most impactful years. It isn't when they're 22 and learning things in college, or it isn't when they become church members. Then that's when the real work begins. And, you now have title of pastor, elder. No, moms, you have the most important years of a child's development, informing them into who they are going to be as the 22-year-old, or as the 40-year-old, or as the whatever-year-old. That is a very, very weighty job.
It almost sounds like, when you say that you're saying that the education that is typically done, say, in a classroom or a curriculum, is almost like it's just right alongside the education of life, of being discipled,
Sure.
being turned into, in our circles, we would say a mature Christian individual, right? It's almost like you're saying that, no, it's just one more spoke on that wheel.
Right.
And yet it's interesting because we have this idea, I think, in our culture that, well, no, it's this other thing, right?
Right.
So you know, we've been seeing in the church, you got kids church, you got big church, you got Sunday school, then they can go off to the real school, the public school or whatever it is, almost like, but what we're saying is like, no, it's holistic. Like, it's not like that we're mixing, it's not we're saying like, well, we do homeschooling because we want our children to have a Christian education. Well, that's part of it, but it's just part of their Christian education. It's just part of educating them. Like, we're Christians, so we're going to educate our children in a Christian manner. And we're not saying this is the only Christian manner. There's other, but for us, this is how we've chosen to do it. And it's holistic, it's integrated. It's like you said, it's no different than you taught them English.
Right.
So now you've picked up a book, and now you're being a little more intentional in terms of, you're not just kind of educating them haphazardly throughout the day. You set aside time to do it, but it's not a different thing entirely than you've always done.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. So that was, how did we go there?
10.
Hour and 10 minutes. I think that's pretty good. Well, thank you for being my first guest.